In pixel art, clouds should never be an afterthought. They can actually have a lot of personality and help tell the story of your scene. So I've done a deep dive into pixel art cloud design, from super simple happy clouds to very intense storm clouds, and I want to share what I've learned with you guys. That way you can create the clouds that you need to really tell the story that you want to tell. Let's do it! Hey guys, I'm Andrew Robinson of Robinson Pixels. I actually started out pixel art when I was a kid, worked on it for years and stopped as a grown-up, and now I've been making up for lost time. So let's go ahead and dive into this thing, starting out with my sketch from Procreate. Right off the cuff, I'm drawing in a scene, and that's for two reasons. One, if I don't know how big a person is, I don't know how big the cloud should be. And two, I study better when I'm drawing for a reason, because otherwise I will get bored. So my clouds will help me shape the mood of different scenes with this guy on the cliff. Over in Pixsquare, I'm using my sketch as a reference layer and tracing it. My canvas is set to my favorite resolution, the one from the Game Boy Advance, 240 by 160 pixels. The character is my OC Gridman. I designed him back when I was in middle school as part of the Mega Man comics I used to make, and he's kinda stuck with me ever since. Gridman's got a donut here because we're starting off simple and happy. For that same reason, we've got a bright blue gradient for the sky, and I'm making sure the tree is nice and bright. You should always try to create synergy in your scenes. Blue skies, bright colors, and a donut call for happy clouds. Let's start out with the simplest cloud ever, which I learned from Super Mario World. It's literally an oval. And already that can be a choice if you know you want a cheerful, simple world. I'm gonna make some copies of it, and let's see how we can push that design further. For this first one, I'm going to shade it with a very light blue with my brush set to dither. In this case, it's just a checkerboard pattern to imply some shadow without it being overwhelming. But maybe you're not feeling dithery. Let's see what it would look like with it shaded solid. Honestly, it looks kind of like an egg, but hey, that can work for your style. We can even combine these techniques by doing one solid shade and dithering an extra dark layer on top of that. It really depends on how you'd want to do it. Just try not to make the colors too intense here because it needs to be clear that this is in the background. Obviously, you probably want to make something more complicated than ovals, so let's do another starter cloud, the one from Super Mario Bros. In general, clouds will be fluffier on top and a little flatter at the bottom. Obviously, there are exceptions, especially depending on the type of cloud, but we'll get to other cloud types later. Now, to give the cloud some dimension, you can generally just add some fluffy squiggles poofing out. Because it's broader and heavier at the bottom, it would have more shadows there. In Super Mario Bros., they even outline the cloud. This isn't something most people would do, but it worked for Nintendo. You might even want to experiment with different colored outlines. I don't think it looks bad with a blue outline. But let's say you don't just want little clouds like these. What if you want really big puffy clouds? How would you do that? Honestly, in pretty much the same way. First, I'll just draw in my general happy blobs. Remember that, just like with real clouds, people could see shapes in them. See, when I got here, I realized this thing kinda looks like a stegosaurus. Just add in some legs here, and yeah, I drew a dino. So unless you want people to see shapes, you might want to go back and randomize your edges a bit more. Now, as for shading it, I actually found it was easier to set the midtone first, and I added in the white highlights after that. That helped my brain to make them look a little more like they're really puffing out. To shade it, I added a very desaturated blue where the cloud would be heaviest. You'll notice I didn't shade all the way to the bottom, and that's for two reasons. I think a rim light looks cool, and that helps provide a visual separation between the blue of the cloud and the blue in the background. Now, all this being said, these have been traditional fluffy clouds, but maybe you want to go more abstract. Do it! You can literally just draw some messy lines to get thin, wispy clouds in the distance, or draw random squiggles. I was actually scrolling through Google Images when I saw someone draw clouds like a big crazy S in the sky. If I'd been thinking, I would have saved it so I could actually credit them in the video, but I didn't, and now I can't find it again. So let me know if you have any idea who it was that kind of draws like this, and I'll credit them in the comments. But I mean, you can really just draw any shapes if you want to, if that fits your vibe. I could see swirls like this one fitting into a seafaring game. Now, all these clouds so far have been pretty far away, right? Like in the distance, but that's not always the story that you want to tell. I want to do Gridman sitting on this cliff with a cup of coffee. He's up before the sun has risen, he's listening to the birds sing, and the sun is coming up right above a cloud layer. It's going to be a completely different style of cloud, which is going to take a lot more effort and kind of work to get it to look right. But it'll be worth it, and it's something you can totally do. So let's do it. The first thing was adjusting my colors. This won't be the final sky color, it's a placeholder. I really just wanted to make sure that the inside of the ground and the tree were darker, almost black, so it would be more clear the lighting is coming from behind, where the sun will be. But for the clouds, I started out with just one big blobby layer. A lot of the focus just went on making sure I didn't have too many jagged edges, since that's not exactly what clouds are known for. Now for coloring them, I'm using a completely different method from before. In the daytime piece, the light source was assumed to be somewhere up above the scene, but here it's going to be peaking right above this cloud layer. So I'm highlighting my clouds with orange on top, and yellow where the sunlight would be strongest. I actually saw a sunset like this once when I was flying into Nashville. There was a beautiful golden sunset above the clouds, and then when we passed through those clouds, it was actually a rainy, nasty day in the city. It was a truly bizarre experience, but one that really stuck out in my mind. Let's go ahead and throw in the sun. It's just a white circle with a yellow outline, and boy does its presence already add a lot to this scene. Honestly, one of the first things it does is tell me the sky colors are not working. So here we go, this is better. I made this with the gradient tool in Pixsquare. It's got different dithering settings, and I really like this fiery red layer at the bottom. Now I really wanted my clouds to have depth, and to do that, you really need multiple layers. At first, I just started squiggling in different colors to pull that off, but then I realized the sunlight would poke through and hit any of these peaks on the clouds. That completely changed my outlook on this scene. You can design an entire golden sunrise by adding in more highlights. Just keep the nearest clouds a bit larger and poofier, and make sure to work in those dark shadows where the sun's not directly hitting, where the clouds are thick. That'll add more contrast and make the highlights look brighter. To give the scene even more life, I added an overlay layer onto the tree and cliff, just on that left side. I used a bright yellow for that, and it really helps sell the idea that it's a very bright sun lighting up the world. But clouds don't always hang out on the same layer, so let's add some up above. I drew these following the same ideas as the ones from the Happy Donut scene, but I'm adding in some very small ones to give more of an illusion of depth. Now I know I said earlier clouds are usually darker along the bottom where they're thicker, but we do need to take that light source into account. The sun is below these ones, so they will all need to be highlighted along the bottom. And because we have such a variety of colors here, that can make the jagged edges of the pixels a little more obvious. That's one time I really like to use anti-aliasing, because it helps blend the colors together. If you're not familiar, anti-aliasing is a shading technique to help with blending. It's where you take the average between two colors and use that to smooth out jagged edges. You can see here I'm using that orangish color at 50% opacity over that purple to anti-alias the edges. Alright, now at this point my scene itself looks a little empty, but I really wanted something cinematic. Based on some advice from my buddy Mike, I raised up that horizon. Of course that required me to draw a bunch of new clouds, but I definitely think this was the right call to give the picture a bit more life. I really liked this version of the picture, but I wanted to convey that Gridman was up early, like while the air is still cool. And that's something that was really easily accomplished by scooting the sun down a little, then recoloring the clouds, sky, trees, and cliff to make everything a little more blue, because, you know, that's a cooler color. And these clouds really help to convey that. But here's the thing, if we're going to consider this an ultimate cloud tutorial, we have to acknowledge that clouds are not always just individual floating things or layers, right? Sometimes they're the whole sky, and that's a completely different ballgame. So we're going to start out with rain clouds based on a technique I actually learned from Shovel Knight. Remember, your clouds are helping tell the story of your scene, and this one is going to be a little sad. Not an all hope is lost scene, he's just a little blue. But for the clouds, we're actually going to add in these bands that make a gradient from dark blue to a lighter gray blue. I don't have them all at equal sizes because nature is a little unpredictable. But are you ready for the fun part? It's like magic. These bands are our clouds. You just start squiggling that line between two colors and all of a sudden your brain is like, oh hey, look at that cloud. But to really sell it, make the colors reach out into each other's turf and add in some swirly, cranky sections that hover between the two. I made sure I only used the colors that were right next to each other because I didn't want too much contrast between any of the sections. And of course, if we really want to make sure these look like rain clouds, well, we can draw in some rain. I didn't animate it, that would be a whole separate video, but I did do some little splash effects, and I really think this works for telling some sort of a story. Now before we get into the cloud structure that really messed with my brain, let's do a super easy one. Snow. I actually took the rain clouds and recolored them. I kept the vibrancy of these colors down so it looked like a serene winter day. Now of course if someone were paying attention to the clouds in detail they might catch that I just did a recolor, so I actually flipped the layer. I think it works visually better this way anyway, Snow clouds are bright, so it makes more sense for the whitest clouds to be on top. And because I couldn't help myself, I redrew Gridman, this time with his hands just to decide while he enjoys the view, and a snow scene would be incomplete without, snow, so I threw some in there, keeping my colors cool and blue. And don't forget, all your colors really matter. These brown rocks look a little wet in this context, so I actually made them a little more yellow. And this looks authentically like a nice chilly scene. Now, I gotta tell you, this next part broke me. Like, completely broke my brain. I almost didn't put it in the video. I really struggled with storm clouds. I worked on the storm clouds specifically for, probably 10 hours, just staring at it over and over and restarting because I just hated everything I did. I even asked in my community posts for some video game suggestions for reference. I got a lot of wonderful responses. You guys are awesome, and I honestly don't think I would have been able to figure out how to do this without you guys' help and encouragement, so thanks. My problem with storm clouds, with this scene especially, is I want them to look angry, just punch you in the face mad. And with the way I've designed this scene, I want them right on top of Gridman. Distant clouds, while they can look really epic, they wouldn't look right here. So I redrew Gridman, standing angry with the pixel gods and challenging them to storm. If you can't tell, he's a metaphor for, me. So here is where it finally started to come together. I copied the damn sunrise clouds from before, flipped them, and recolored them. It took some adjusting. I hadn't actually detailed that area that was behind the cliff earlier, so, little odds and ends. That'll be it for the top angry layer of the clouds. But for the rest of this guy, yeah, I'm sticking with the rain clouds from before. Squashed and stretched and recolored, but I'm going with them. They're a little greenish because sometimes clouds look a little green right before a big storm. And speaking of a big storm, Gridman wants a storm. So let's give it to him. Friggin' lightning bolt. I just drew this in with a white pencil. It came together pretty quickly. Those clouds need some highlights, so I used a pencil at low opacity and kept scribbling where I needed it. Plus, I did overlay layers for intense highlights on top of Gridman and the environment. Holy crap, this is starting to come together. But lightning doesn't just highlight people and stuff, it'll light up the whole night sky. I'm kicking the far clouds to purple and way brighter. Those angry top clouds need some color too. They're gonna be blue. Remember, big contrast is key with bright lights, so I'm only lightening the brightest shades on these clouds. Keeping the rest darker will make those highlights really pop. And top freaking da! Diddly do recap song, look through all the stuff! We learned how to make so many different type of clouds. It's a whole lot of fun, like weirdly fun. Now, if you enjoyed watching me go through all these different clouds and figure out what I was doing, like the video, I would really appreciate that. And I will say this took me hours, right? Like hours and hours, and you may not always have time for hours and hours to learn every single detail. You might want a shortcut. And if that's the case, I've got a video on pixel art shortcuts, which you can watch right over here. And follow along for more pixel practice. And if my voice has been squeaky today, it's because I'm sick. So, hopefully it's not too bad.